I was thinking about Mr. Snuffleupagus. Like, even before Tessa actually challenged me to talk about Muppets or Sesame Street, I had been thinking about Mr. Snuffleupagus, or Snuffy, Big Bird's best friend on Sesame Street. Snuffy's this big brown elephant-esque Muppet creature. For the first 14 years of his existence on Sesame Street, the grown-ups of Sesame Street didn't believe he existed. They thought he was Big Bird's imaginary friend. The running gag would be that every time Snuffy would be close to the adults, he'd end up leaving right before they'd actually meet him, and no one would believe Big Bird when he'd say, "Oh, he was just right there." And it even led to Big Bird getting blamed for things that wasn't his fault. It's because of some confusion going on with Snuffy. Now, all of this is from before I was born. Snuffy was introduced in 1971, and he got revealed to the adults as being a real friend, not an imaginary friend, in 1985. So all of this happened before I existed, but I did watch a VHS of a Sesame Street special called Don't Eat the Pictures that had come out in 1983, but I watched it a bunch as a kid. Sidebar about Don't Eat the Pictures, that fell under that. This was a reoccurring kind of storyline when I was a kid, or at least I remember at least. Do any of you remember stories where people like stayed in museums overnight? Like either moved in or accidentally got locked in the museum? That's what this special was. It's the Sesame Street gang ends up getting stuck at the Metropolitan Museum of Art overnight. I feel like that would fall in line with many VEDSies' interests. But back to the point. And so that was still in the time when the adults didn't believe in Snuffy. So that's how I was familiar with it as a kid. And it drove me nuts. I get very frustrated when that happens in stories, when one character knows the truth, but it seems just impossible to other people. So they kind of blow that person off, even though they're telling the truth. They're just like, "Oh, you're just making stuff up. You're just a kid. That can't be real." It's not a bad trope. It's something I find personally triggering and just very frustrating to watch for me. Which is why I find Snuffy's reveal finally to the adults when they find out he's real so satisfying. Big Bird even has this huge "I told you so" moment to the adults, and they don't even call him on it. They're not like, "Oh, that's in bad taste." They're like, "Absolutely, you're right. You did tell us so, and we're so sorry we didn't believe you." The reason they ended the Snuffy gag of the adults not believing in him was because, I'm not going to go into all the details, but there were a lot of cases at the time about children being abused. And the writers didn't want to keep pushing the narrative of, if you go to your adults with something, they won't believe you. That's not what they wanted to be telling kids. They wanted to portray this story of, you should be able to go to your adults with something and they should believe you. I take great comfort in knowing this program after doing this gag, this same kind of story for so long, when they saw that the world needed a different story, that their programming needed to tell a different message, that they shifted gears and they did it. And I am comforted in that moment they had when Big Bird did have his "I told you so," and they gave it a moment to say, "Yes, you did, and you were right to be frustrated. Your frustrations with us were valid." This is not the only time that Sesame Street has done this, where they've changed themes or stories or added characters to better meet the needs of the community they were trying to reach. The Snuffy example is just the one that's been on my brain lately. So thank you, Tessa, for using your brain twin powers and giving me a challenge where I was able to talk about it. And also, if you still have big dreams of me talking about something different than just a very specific Snuffy rant, let me know. I will happily talk about this again in the future. In any case, to my friends and fellow VEDSies, I will see you all tomorrow.